Okay, the next topic is selecting subset of columns and subset of rows. We already looked at how to select columns and rows with reindex. Right? Reindex is one way of selecting. Here is another way where select by columns all rows. So if you want to select a few columns, if you want to select just one column, then you say that particular column name. So that column will be selected. Then you can save it wherever you want, or if you want to perform some kind of function, then you can use that. Okay, and if you want to select a list of columns, then you have to provide that as a list inside the square bracket. So that's why you have two square brackets. The first square bracket is for indexing of df5, and the second pair of square brackets is the list that contains the column names that we want to select. Okay, so selecting a single column or selecting multiple columns. Okay, that's here. Now select by rows, okay, all columns. So here we can use the implicit index. Okay, so df5 3 through 5. Remember, 5 is not inclusive, so it's going to select index 3 and index 4. Okay, so that's implicit index, and it's going to select all the columns. Okay, so here 0, 1, 2, 3, and 4, V0 and F4. Right? Now df5:3 is starting from the beginning, going up to but not including 3. So 0, 1, 2. Okay. So these two examples are using implicit index. You can also select using explicit index in this way. Okay. So you specify the starting index and the ending index, explicit index. Now explicit index is inclusive on both sides. So it's going to start from A4 and then finish F4, F4 inclusive. Okay, that's what you see here. So to select rows and all columns, so you just use the index, the data frame name, and then within square brackets you use the indexes. You can use implicit index, okay, and use the same convention like how you accessed string variables early on, okay, or you can access through row indexes. Okay. All right, so let's, okay, your turn. Okay, let's see. With reindex, subset the first okay, so with reindex subset, okay, so we want to use dfq. Let's get dfq17c. Let's see what that is. Now we want to select, okay, dfq17c. Okay, so that's the data frame from which we want to select the first, third, and the fifth row, okay, of the, okay, so now we are combining rows and columns. I think we didn't, okay, so I didn't show you an example of that, but you have to just combine the two, then you get it. So here we want to reindex, right? So we use reindex. Okay. So our data frame name dot reindex. Okay. So then 1. Now reindex is a function, so you should have parentheses. After that, you specify the rows that we want. The rows we want are the first, third, and the fifth row. Okay, so you cannot use implicit index now. because implicit index you have to use a range, so you have to use the explicit index. So we want the first one, so which is I sub 0. So here when you have to select multiple rows, we have to provide the rows that we want as a list. So I0, okay, and then the first row, then the second and third row is index I2, and then the fifth row is index I4. Okay. Now, if I do not specify columns, then it's going to assume everything, all columns, and it's going to select the 3 row indexes that we have specified, the first, third, and the fifth row, and we're using the explicit index here. Okay. But we want selected columns, then you say columns equal to, and then you give the column names. Okay, what are the column names we want? Name and date of birth. So name with N uppercase and then DOB. Now you get only those 2 columns. Okay? All right, B, subset the second to fifth rows of DFQ17. Okay. So since we want a range, we can do it in 2 different ways. Okay. DFQ17 we want, okay, if you're going to use implicit index, then remember it's going to be 0, 1, 2, 3, and so on. So this is going to be 1 through I4, so that is 0, 1, 2, 3, 4. Now if I use 4, then 4 is exclusive, so 4 is not going to be included, so I have to use 5. Right? Now that's going to give me the rows that I wanted. Or I can do it this way too. DFQ17C, okay, I1 through I4 using explicit index. This is using explicit index and will give you the same result. Okay, one is using implicit index, the other one is using explicit index. All right. Now C, create a list of column names of each data type. All right. So we have to, let's first figure out what are the data types there. So if you do info, so that's going to give us the data types. So we have a couple of integer, couple of object, and then there is a date. So let's say date columns. Okay. Well, so if you do DFQ17C and then select data types, okay, select data types, and then you say what data type. You want date time data type, so you just say date time. Okay. Now this is going to create a complete data frame of selected data. But what we want is only column names. So at the end, we have to say columns. Okay. Now, this line of code will give you the column names as an index object. Okay. But we want as a list object, so we have to say list here. Then date calls will give you just the OB, right? So this is how you'll create a list of column names of a particular data type. So this here we used date time data type. We could use the other codes that are permissible. Okay, go back up here and you'll see what are the different types that are allowed. For date time, you can use NP date time 64 or date time 64 or simply date time. All of them, all three of them will work. Okay, and say numeric columns. Okay, well, we can actually copy paste the same code and make the necessary change. So here, if you instead of date time, we can say number within quotes, or you can use np dot number without quotes. Okay, so that will also work. So numeric calls or weight and age. So you have weight and age. All right. So that leaves us with string object. Okay. All right. So here, did you get this completed? Numeric columns. Okay. Then say str columns. Okay, again, same code. Here, instead of date time, you should have what? For string, we use object as the data type. So if you use object here, object, so str calls will give you name and smoker. So those are the two, name and smoker, that are object. Now if you have any category, so you don't have any category columns here, but you use the same code, okay, and instead of object, you would put category, then you'll get category columns.